I stood at the edge of the ballroom, the soft clink of champagne flutes and hum of string quartet music pressing against my skin like static. The air smelled like roses and money. I tugged at the seam of my black dress, not out of discomfort, but out of habit, an old reflex I hadn't shed. Even after 21 years of wearing tactical vests and walking into rooms with my weapon drawn, I hadn't planned to come. 3 days ago, I was in Bogota. Before that, Lima. The operation was supposed to last another week, but Martinez had pulled me aside with a look that said it wasn't a suggestion. "You've been running on fumes and protein bars for 18 months. He told me, "Take the weekend. Go see your family. Let them see you." I didn't tell him they never really looked. So here I was at Caleb's wedding, watching my father work the room like the insurance salesman he once was and would always be in spirit. He slapped backs, told punchlines with too much volume, and bragged about his golden son like Caleb had just been handed the keys to the Oval Office. "And this one," Walter said, his arm sweeping toward me as I approached the table. "This is Elira. She works in security or something. Government stuff. Nothing dangerous." Laughter. Light. Polite. But cutting. My father's smile was wide, his tone dismissive. Effortless. I nodded, said nothing. Just like I had when he called my deployment volunteer work or my DEA badge something you probably got in DC after filling out a form. There was a time I would have corrected him. There was a time I would have needed to. Now. I just watched. His hand gripped Caleb's shoulder, knuckles tight with pride. This guy. He boomed. 6-figure salary, corner office, company car. Makes a father proud. My glass was half full. My stomach was empty. My silence was full of weight. I didn't flinch when he said it. I just let the words sit in the air. Untouched. They weren't true, but they'd been said so many times. They might as well have been a second gospel in this family. I turned toward the bar, away from the applause and the bright chandeliers, and felt my phone buzz in my hand. 3 days earlier, the air in the Colombian jungle was thick with tension. My earpiece crackled as I crouched behind a rotting tree trunk. Eyes locked on the compound through the green haze. The operation had been in motion for over 18 months. We had one chance to make it clean, one mistake, and we'd be pulling body bags out by sunrise. "Go," I said into the mic. Steady. The team moved like muscle memory precise. Silent. Lethal. Within minutes, the gate was breached, the guards disarmed, the intel rooms secured. I was second through the door. Gun drawn. No hesitation. The cartel leader was in the rear office. We found him trying to burn files his last. Desperate move before the cuffs closed around his wrists. No bullets fired, no agents harmed, exactly as I'd planned it. Later. As the chopper lifted us over the canopy, I finally let myself exhale. $2 billion in assets seized. 37 arrests. 0 casualties. The most successful operation I'd led. And maybe the most important one of my career. Back at the Bogota safe house, Martinez handed me a cold bottle of water and studied my face for a long second. He'd been my superior for over a decade. But tonight, he looked at me like something had shifted. "You need to go home," he said. "I've still got the debrief Elira. That's an order." I didn't argue. I just waited. He leaned forward. "You've spent 2 years in safe houses and surveillance vans. You've earned a weekend. Go to the wedding. Let them see you." I almost told him it wouldn't matter, that I could walk in wearing body armor and dragging a cartel leader behind me, and they'd still ask if I'd thought about going back to school. But I didn't say it, because the truth was simpler. They never asked. They didn't want to know what I did. Not really. Not when it didn't fit the version of me they'd already written. Elira the dropout. Elira the quiet one. Elira who never quite lived up to Caleb. So I packed a bag, booked the flight, and arrived in Atlanta with 2 things in my suitcase. A dress I didn't care about and 21 years of work no one there would believe. I returned to my table just as the clinking of silver on glass signaled another toast. Dad stood again, already flushed from wine and attention. The microphone in his hand wasn't necessary. His voice had never needed help filling a room. "I just want to say a few more words," he began, grinning wide as Caleb and his new bride turned to face him. "My son, what can I say? Graduated summa cum laude, landed a job straight out of school, just got promoted to regional director, corner office, company car, 6 figures by 30. He's everything I ever dreamed a son could be." The room broke into soft applause. Caleb gave a sheepish smile, soaking in the moment. Dad turned slightly, hand motioning loosely toward where I sat. "And my daughter, Elira. Well, she's taken a different path. Didn't finish college, bounced around a bit. Works a government job now. I think it's security or something. It's steady. You know, pays the bills." I kept my expression neutral, my grip tightening just slightly around the stem of my glass. Aunt Lydia leaned in, her voice warm but oblivious. "It's sweet you came. I heard you're a guard now, must be exciting. In its own way." I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak. Years of tactical restraint taught me how to keep my body still when every nerve screamed. I didn't flinch. I didn't correct. I simply looked past her. My gaze found the TV screen behind the bar, still muted, still playing a highlight reel of the news cycle. Then my phone vibrated. I slipped it from my purse, glanced down. Martinez, turn on CNN. Now. I rose quietly and made my way across the ballroom, weaving through tables without making a ripple. No one noticed. No one ever really did. The bartender was drying glasses when I reached him. I tapped the bar once. "Channel 7, please." He grabbed the remote without a word. The screen changed. A newscaster appeared, grave and composed. Behind him, images of armed raids, handcuffed men, and stacks of seized weapons flashed in sequence. Then my name appeared on the screen, and the face that filled it was mine. The footage rolled in slow. Deliberate sequence, first the aerial shot of the compound, then helmet cam clips from agents breaching doorways, followed by a table piled high with weapons, cash, and bricks wrapped in plastic. The news anchor's voice cut through the hum of the hotel lobby in a landmark international operation led by the DEA. Over $2 billion in narcotics and assets were seized from the Serrano cartel. Dozens arrested. Key leadership dismantled. Then, my photo appeared. I wasn't smiling in it. Official DEA headshot, plain backdrop, neutral expression, the kind of face that didn't blink under pressure. Elira Vaughn. The anchor continued. Special agent in charge for South American operations. Is credited with coordinating Operation Deep Lantern, the most successful anti-narcotics initiative in over a decade. The bartender paused his glass drying and stared up at the screen. Then back at me. "No kidding," he said under his breath. A couple seated nearby glanced over. The man raised his eyebrows. The woman nudged his arm and whispered something I didn't catch. I stayed still. Didn't blink. I'd seen my name on classified briefings, on arrest warrants, on federal reports. But never like this. Never out in the open. Leading a multi-agency task force. The anchor continued. Vaughn's intelligence protocols have since been adopted by multiple federal departments. Sources say she is a top candidate for DEA administrator once Director Martinez retires next year. I exhaled slowly. Not at the words. At the years they didn't say. The hotel lobby doors opened behind me. Heels clicked across the marble. I didn't need to turn. Elira Aunt Lydia's voice. Light and confused. "Oh, there you are. I wondered where you slipped off to." She stepped beside me, following my gaze toward the screen just as it shifted to aerial footage of the jungle raid. She clucked her tongue. "Awful. Isn't it all that drug mess? Thank goodness you've got a safe job. I feel for those poor agents who have to do this kind of thing." I almost laughed. 3 days ago, I was dangling from a helicopter, boots first into that compound. I just nodded. She looped her arm through mine, casually steering us back toward the ballroom. Come on, your father's about to give another toast. I let her guide me. The screen behind us still showed my name. The applause began before we even crossed the threshold. I re-entered the ballroom just as my father raised his glass again. His voice rang out, full of pride and the slow confidence of someone who had held a captive audience his whole life. I want to take a moment, he said, to talk about success, about building something that lasts, about making your family proud. He stood beside Caleb's table, one hand resting heavily on my brother's shoulder. Caleb's wife smiled tightly, already knowing her role in this story. The music dimmed. The guests leaned in. My son. Dad continued, gesturing toward Caleb. Did it all the right way? College with honors, moved up quickly in his company. 6 figures by 30, a beautiful wife, a home in a great neighborhood, promotions on the horizon. He's the kind of man you hope your daughter marries. He's everything I ever wanted for my family. There was a beat of applause, just enough to encourage him. I stood toward the back, watching from beside a tall plant near the exit. And my daughter, Elira. He hesitated just long enough to draw the room's attention. She's taken a different path, didn't finish college, never really settled down, no kids, works for the government now, some kind of security job. It's steady work, I'm sure. Nothing wrong with that. But it's not exactly what you picture when you think about your little girl's future. The words should have stung. Once. They would have, but this time. They landed with something colder final. Almost clinical, like he was reading from a resume he'd never bothered to update. Aunt Lydia chuckled beside me. At least she came. She whispered to the woman next to her. Even if she's just a guard now. My phone buzzed in my hand again. CNN was still running coverage, still showing my name, still repeating the numbers 37 arrests, $2 billion seized, and still, I was invisible in this room, until someone near the head table spoke, louder than they realized. Wait, isn't she on the news right now? A few heads turned, murmurs broke out. A woman in a seafoam dress pulled out her phone, squinted at the screen, then looked up straight at me. It's her. She said, Elira Vaughn, D.A. All at once. Phones appeared across the room. Screens lit up. Gasps spread in soft waves. My father kept talking, oblivious. She just led some huge raid. Someone whispered, No way. Another said, She was in Colombia 3 days ago. Dad's voice faltered, then stopped. He looked out over the room and saw that every face had turned not toward him, but toward me, and I stepped forward. I walked toward the front of the room, heels echoing against marble. Conversations died. Glasses froze mid-air. My father turned slowly, confusion settling on his face as if I were a stranger crashing his speech. I need to clarify something, I said, my voice calm, firm. You told everyone I dropped out of college. Dad's expression tightened. Well, you left Columbia after the first year I left because I was recruited by the DEA, I said, not raising my voice, not needing to. I spent the next year at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. I've been serving for 21 years. The air changed, words left in mouths. Someone's phone chimed, and no one moved to silence it. I'm not a security guard. I continued. I'm special agent in charge of South American operations. I just returned from leading a joint task force that dismantled the Serrano cartel. Gasps rippled. Phones reappeared. This time, not in boredom, but in disbelief. Screens glowed with headlines I already knew by heart. DEA's most successful operation in a decade. $2 billion in assets seized. Elira Vaughn leads record-breaking raid. I coordinated with 5 countries, brought in 37 arrests without a single loss of life. We pulled $2 billion in narcotics off the streets, I said, scanning the faces now locked on me. That's what I've been doing while you were telling people I couldn't finish school, at one of the tables. A woman turned her phone toward her husband, It's really her, she whispered. She's trending. I kept walking until I stood directly across from my father, who had gone quiet, champagne glass trembling in his hand. You talk about success. Dad, I said. You talk about dreams. But you never once asked what mine were. Never once asked what I was building. His mouth opened, but no sound came. My work speaks for itself. I protect lives. I serve this country, and I don't need your permission to be proud of it. A silence settled, not awkward, but reverent. I turned toward Caleb. Congratulations, I said softly. I hope your marriage brings you joy. And then I turned back to the room. I've spent 2 decades serving in silence. Tonight, I decided to speak. Phones flashed, eyes followed me, and for the first time, they weren't seeing the girl my father described. They were seeing me. The moment hung in the air, suspended like a breath that no one dared release. My father stood frozen, his hand still wrapped around the stem of his champagne flute until it slipped through his fingers. The glass shattered against the marble floor, sharp and sudden. A gasp rippled through the guests as silence swallowed the room whole. Walter Vaughn had finally run out of words. I didn't flinch. I simply looked at him, the man who had shaped the narrative of my life for everyone else in this room. The man who decided long ago what version of me he could accept. And for once, he had nothing to say. You talk about success like it only comes in one form, I said quietly, like a house or a title or a wedding photo. My voice didn't shake, my hands didn't tremble. I don't have to define my work. Dad, it already speaks for itself. He opened his mouth, closed it again. I watched the color drain from his face. I turned slightly, my gaze finding Caleb. He looked stunned, but not angry, maybe even a little ashamed. He gave a slow, uncertain nod. I returned it. Caleb, I said. Congratulations. Truly. He managed to faint. Thank you. But it came out as a whisper. That was enough. I stepped back from the head table, heels clicking gently, deliberately. With each step, the ballroom seemed to quiet further. The applause never came, but neither did the mockery. Just silence and eyes. All of them watching, listening, processing. As I reached the exit, I placed a hand on the tall glass door, ready to leave the room and the version of me they had always clung to behind. Then I heard him. Elira, wait. I stopped, not turning. I'm sorry, my father said, his voice hollow, unfamiliar, for once. It didn't come from his chest, but from somewhere smaller. I stood there for a beat, letting it settle. Then I said, I know. And I walked out. The night air outside was crisp, cool against my skin like a quiet absolution. I walked without looking back, each step farther from the ballroom, farther from the version of me they'd clung to for so long. My phone buzzed in my hand, then again, and again. I unlocked the screen. 22 missed calls. The area codes spanned coasts New York, D.C., even international numbers. 37 new messages, agents, colleagues, old mentors. Some were simple, proud of you, others more blunt. They finally saw you. Then, one from Martinez, the president wants to meet Monday morning. Hope you got some cake. I read it twice, then once more. Slower. And I smiled. Not because of the president, not even because of Martinez, but because in a room full of people who had ignored me for decades, I'd spoken, and my voice hadn't cracked. I reached my car, the same rental I'd picked up at the Atlanta airport 2 days earlier. Basic, quiet, functional, just like the way I'd lived, never flashy, never asking for applause. I sat behind the wheel and let the silence fill the cabin. No radio, no headlines, no spinning lights, just the steady beat of my own breathing. They knew now. All of them. the ones who whispered, the ones who rolled their eyes, the ones who pitied me because they never bothered to ask who I'd become. But the truth wasn't for them. It never had been. It was for me. I looked out across the parking lot, at the grand hotel behind me, at the tiny ballroom where I'd been erased for years until tonight. I tapped a single reply to Martinez. Got the cake. I'm ready. And then I started the engine, headlights flaring to life, cutting through the dark like I always had quietly, steadily, without permission,